Mental health continues to be a problem across America and beyond. What can we do to address these issues, and what can companies do to help fix problems that people are facing on an everyday basis? Well, what company is doing exactly that? MindMed is working on clinical trials right now. We'll be talking about this with CEO Rob Barrow. Rob, welcome back to the show.
Thanks so much. Pleasure to be here.
So I mentioned at the start you're working on some clinical trials, and of course your company is focused on experimental medicine around LSD. And we'll be talking about that. I've had you on the show before, and I've had the previous CEO on the show before, so our audience is no stranger to what MindMed does. And people think of LSD as a recreational drug, which it is, but you're taking it a step further and producing medicinal properties based on LSD and other medicines as well. So we'll be talking about that. But first, let's visit what I stated earlier, which is that mental health is a problem across America. How much of a problem is it? During COVID, we saw spikes in suicide rates, thoughts of suicide, depression went up, rates of depression, rates of people just abstaining from social activities, not just because of lockdowns, but because they don't want to. We saw what the lockdowns did to people's mental health overall. And of course, substance abuse was a big problem. That went up. Is that still a problem right now, or are we in the early stages or maybe late stages of a recovery?
Absolutely. We all know there's a massive mental health epidemic that's sort of a twin epidemic alongside of the pandemic we've experienced over the last several years. 1 in 5 Americans suffers from a mental health disorder. We've seen double-digit growth over the last decade. We've seen even more acute growth over the last 2 years in depression, anxiety, and suicidal behavior. And it's extremely unfortunate that has landed disproportionately on younger individuals and on lower socioeconomic individuals as well. And so there are no bounds to who is suffering from mental health conditions. And fortunately, we're seeing a turning the page in terms of new treatments coming to market, but we haven't turned the page yet in terms of treating these conditions and seeing that growth subside.
Okay. Let's dig into this a little bit deeper. So you're saying that mental health was already an issue, but COVID exacerbated this issue. How exactly did it do that?
I think that's absolutely the case, and there's been a number of avenues where that could have happened, but just the social disconnection and the isolation and the levels of underlying anxiety when we lose the ability to engage in the broader world and we're faced with social isolation. It leads to really, really unfortunate mental health care outcomes, anxiety, depression, and many other conditions that have just undercut the well-being of the general population.
Well, it seems like our future overall as a society is moving more towards that voluntarily. As we speak, many companies across the nation are willingly letting employees work from home forever. Virtual work is here to stay for many companies that previously were just traditional office settings. And of course, the metaverse is something that is all hyped right now. That's a big buzzword. Facebook, as you know, changed its name to Meta. So it seems like people are going to be interacting with each other virtually more on a regular basis anyway. So how do you reconcile those two, that people do crave interaction, social interaction, maybe physical interaction as well, but that we're also going to be physically farther apart from one another in the future?
Certainly an interesting contract that we're seeing in the broader world with the metaverse. What I can certainly speak to is that for MindMed, we think our therapies are there to enhance connectivity. They're there to enhance well-being and ultimately set those individuals who are suffering from mental health disorders on a new trajectory in their disease course, help them get back into social engagements, approach their life and the engagement in life that brings value to it. So it is an interesting environment and time we live in terms of the metaverse and all that is happening there. Where we really hope to have an impact is where it has become a mental health disorder, and we have individuals who have self-isolated or who have been isolated, and that leads into depression or anxiety outcomes, giving an opportunity to bring them out of those conditions and back into their thriving as part of their broader life. Okay.
So just one more question on the metaverse, and we'll move on to your drugs. Now, so you don't think that living virtually is going to, I guess, make the crisis even worse?
It is an interesting backdrop to be living in an environment where we see mental health disorders growing substantially, where we see social isolation contributing to mental health outcomes. And at the same time, we see a growing interest in technology that might point us more in a socially isolated direction. That's a very grand question, and one that we'll certainly see how it progresses over time.
Isolation though, because you and I are speaking technically virtually right now. I mean, I'm not physically in the same room as you. Obviously, that's not the same when you're in person with somebody, but I guess in a way it makes us even more connected than before. I'm just trying to put the pieces together because during the pandemic, it's not like people weren't socializing at all. They were still talking on the phone, going on Zoom, going on Facebook, Instagram, whatever have you. It's just that people were isolated and locked down, and that obviously had a huge impact on mental health. So is it really because of a lack of interaction that depression rates have spiked, Robert?
It's certainly multifactorial what leads to mental health conditions. It's not one thing or the other. What we do know is that when there are surveys done of individuals' self-reported well-being or happiness, it is often tied to having close social connections with family or friends. And so while we certainly applaud the ability to connect virtually to the extent we're able, I think everyone is clamoring for getting back to some semblance of normalcy and some level of physical connection. So certainly our focus at MindMed is about individuals who are suffering from mental health disorders and being able to treat those disorders so they can re-engage however they're going to engage in social connection in their broader life.
So let's talk about the medicines that you're working on and going through trials and what exactly those can do for exactly those people you just described, those people going through mental health conditions and problems and depression.
Absolutely. So we have 3 lead drug programs that we're working on, and they're focused on different areas of brain health disorders. One of the leading ones, one we're extremely excited about, having just gotten cleared from FDA to move forward into a phase 2 trial, is LSD, or a pharmaceutically optimized form of LSD for the treatment of generalized anxiety disorder. We're going to be treating 200 patients in a large phase 2 clinical trial this year. We also have a program for a treatment of opioid withdrawal and opioid use disorder called 18MC. And then finally, one that's directly hitting the topic you're talking about here is the RN enantiomer of MDMA, which is a pro-social drug. We've seen MDMA in phase 3 clinical trials for post-traumatic stress disorder, but one of its 2 constituent components, the R enantiomer, has demonstrated pro-social effects. We're developing this in autism spectrum disorder, where one of the core features is social anxiety and deficits in social functioning. So to be able to bring these treatments to patients, both for anxiety, depression, and for conditions that are directly linked to social challenges, it is very core to our mission, and ultimately.
I'm sorry, I cut you off.
Please
continue. I was just wondering whether or not you could elaborate on what it means to be more pro-social and what these pro-social effects are, because I think a lot of introverted people might be wondering, is this something I could just take before going to a party and I could be more social, or that's not really how it works?
No, and RMDMA, what we know about its activity is primarily derived from preclinical models where we look at animal models and social engagement in these models. It does demonstrate pro-social effects similar to what you see with MDMA and its empathogenic qualities. However, it has some advantages over the racemic mixture. And so we're really excited about the opportunity to bring this forward. Everything we do is about treating conditions and disorders that helps improve mental health outcomes for patients. Certainly, we have no angle at treating the general population outside of regulated products that are there to treat diseases that are labeled for their indications by FDA and other regulatory authorities.
Okay, and so the MDMA-based drug, what's your target audience for that? What kind of, what's the typical afflicted person that would want to take this drug or need to take it?
So our initial focus is on treating patients with autism spectrum disorder. And we want to be really clear, one of the real benefits, there are no available therapies for patients with autism that treat the core symptoms. This would be the first in-class drug to do that. And unlike some of the drugs that are used for patients with autism, RMDMA has the likelihood of being forwarded as a pro-social drug, one that enhances social connection and well-being, doesn't just dampen side effects and and act as a sedative or something to dull the effects.
Yeah, and from my understanding, there's a spectrum of autistic properties, right? There's not just one type of autism. There's many different forms of autism with people. People have varying degrees of autism as well. Some are more noticeable in social settings than others. Am I correct?
So autism spectrum disorder, by its very definition, is certainly a spectrum, and there's a wide variety of ways that the individuals who are diagnosed with autism experience and engage with the broader world. We're certainly in the early stages of exploring exactly where this would fit best, but we think there's an opportunity to really help across the spectrum and across the entire population that could potentially benefit.
Okay, and your drug helps everybody on the entire spectrum?
So we're moving forward this year with an IND enabling program, meaning we'd be targeting to move forward into clinical trials in subsequent years. We haven't gotten to the point to answer that question quite yet. We will certainly be exploring which groups, which subsets of any given population that we're looking at would benefit most from our therapies.
So I think investors of your company would like to know what's the next step in terms of FDA approvals, and when we can see these trials go to, I guess, completion and finally to either production or potentially to a sale of a large pharmaceutical.
Absolutely. Our ATMC program and our LSD program, we're just in the early part of 2022 launching our phase 2 trials. Those are both expected to read out in late 2023, at which time we should have a very clear indication on the clinical activity in our populations of interest. From there, it would be progressing into phase 3 trials and on towards NDAs and approvals or partnerships for these programs. So we're moving forward as aggressively as we can to get these trials conducted, up and running, and fully enrolled, so that we can generate these data to definitively establish that we are seeing effects with these molecules.
Okay, and I think investors are also wondering what you're doing right now with your financing. Whether or not you have substantial financing to take you to the next step.
Absolutely. We'll have an earnings call at the end of the first quarter and give a bit more guidance about where we're going and where we are in our financials. But we're well funded. We've had an extraordinary history of support from the investor community and been well funded to date, and are well funded to take our programs through our key milestones. So we are laser focused on managing our company very tightly and getting through those milestones and delivering the data that will drive substantial value growth beyond.
Are you thinking of issuing more financing in the future, whether in the form of equity or debt?
It's always something that I think any pre-commercial company is always entertaining and exploring. Certainly as we see opportunities to continue our growth, continue our following, continue our future prospects, we're always entertaining opportunities for that.
Okay. Before I let you go, new projects that are on the horizon that you might want to share with our audience and to investors?
Absolutely. We have a number of collaborations ongoing, both earlier in development and looking at opportunities later in development. So we're always open to exploring new programs. We have collaborations we've announced with an Israeli group that is looking at a specialized delivery technology for some psychedelic molecules. We have a partnership with a Swiss group who is developing novel psychedelic and non-psychedelic molecules that we are exploring to take forward into the clinic. So we're developing a fully integrated pharmaceutical company, and some of these new projects that we hope to bring into the pipeline in subsequent months and years to come are very exciting, and we look forward to continue the growth of our pipeline and our progress with our programs.
Good. All right. Well, I'm happy for your progress so far, and I'm looking forward to the next phase of MindMed's development. I'll have you back on to follow up. Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Thank you for watching Kitco News. I'm David Lin.